Right, guys, in this day and age, I don't often get to point out something good that this government is doing, and rightly so, given the fact that they have criminalised you seeing your own family. But when they do something the people will support or voted for, I will report it, as I always did. Unfortunately, these are few and far between because we must save the NHS, despite the fact that everyone pays for it to save them if they need it, never the other way around, and certainly not paying with their freedoms. I'm sure most would agree it's both amazing and soul-destroying seeing what our fellow Brits are accepting as their way of life under a Conservative government that has conserved nothing and destroyed everything so far. But at least they are thinking forward in relation to Brexit and trying to stop Labour reversing Brexit when they get in power, which of course they will, and sooner than we all expected because Boris is sinking the Tories daily at this point. You might remember I pointed out in a video the deal Boris Johnson made with the EU left a lot to chance and of course the whims of future government ministers who could change the deal, so we are essentially back in the EU. It appears Boris either knew this or has been pressured to solidify Brexit and independence in UK law now, which I'm sure you would agree is what the deal was supposed to do, showing how shit it really is, and proving once again he capitulated to the EU, not the other way around. For him, no deal was never on the table, guys. You can all see that now if you did not before. But back to the good news, the Telegraph are actually reporting on a new directive given to the civil service, instructing them to remove even the mention of EU regulations or statutory instruments from UK law to stop Labour reversing it, or at least make it harder, as it might not necessarily be able to stop them, but let's check it out quickly. It headlines Operation Bleach to scrub the EU from the statute book. Officials have been tasked with leafing through regulations and statutory instruments covering the 40-year membership of the EU, which is obviously good, but once again is leaving a lot to chance because the civil service are a moaning bunch of tosspots, something we have called out many times. It says Boris Johnson has secretly ordered civil servants to strip references to European Union from tens of thousands of laws to stop Labour reversing Brexit after the next general election in a plan known by some in Whitehall as Operation Bleach. And also that there says to me that Boris Johnson is shitting his pants at the moment in relation to the next election, though obviously he won't be fighting it, it will be someone else. But the Tories, I'm sure, must know that the shit will hit the fan once the next election comes if they don't stop this lunacy soon. As a matter of fact, it might even be too late. While they might win the next election, it won't be by the distance that they did in 2019. We could well end up with a coalition government they have pissed off that many people, which let me tell you is not good for the country and no one really wants it. No one wants Labour especially anywhere near power, but the Tories have been cocking it up royally. It says officials have been tasked with leafing through regulations and statutory instruments, SIs, covering the UK's 40-year membership of the EU, so that Brexit is cemented in UK law and cannot be easily unwound by a future government, which I'm sure you would agree also needs to include future Tory governments because there's a bunch of Ramonas in there also. We ain't got to worry about the SNP or indeed the Lib Dems because they ain't getting anywhere. At this point, a limp dick dog has more support around the country than the Lib Dems ever will. It says the news comes just days after the European Research Group of Conservative MPs, in its verdict on the UK-EU post-Brexit trade deal, warned that ministers would have to be robust in ensuring that Britain is not gradually reassimilated back into the influence of Brussels by future administrations, something I actually covered in a video. So the Telegraph are like 3 or 4 days behind on this one. Last week, former Labour Shadow Minister Rosie Duffield said the majority of Labour MPs were desperate to rejoin the EU at heart, which is something we obviously knew, adding that Labour MPs voted for Boris Johnson's deal with a heavy heart and haven't given up on EU membership, which if I'm honest I don't think many Tory MPs have given up on either. They all hope to be back in there being paid by their masters in Brussels. In a move to ensure that Brexit cannot be unwound, the Prime Minister has tasked a team of 20 civil servants with the project which has been branded Operation Bleach by some insiders. The officials are, according to a source, looking at how we can cleanse our legislative framework of references to EU law or any kind of impact of EU law. It is going to be a mammoth task because there are thousands of pieces of legislation, statutory instruments, regulations and that sort of thing. Which obviously we all know it's going to be. There will be thousands of different things intertwined with all of our laws. This should have already been gotten out in the 4 years that we've been arguing with these tosspots over in Brussels. But obviously our governments and governments before it are piss poor losers that don't have a clue what they're doing and do not serve the people of this country. They fucking serve themselves. It goes goes on, ministers said they were in a race against time to ensure that the changes were made before the next general election expected in 2024, when a Labour government could try to reforge links between London and Brussels, which obviously they would do. One minister said this is the government to do it if a future Labour government won't. Another minister added the fear that people have was not that we would have another referendum, but that there would be a slow creep making references to court rulings, which obviously you can guarantee will come from Labour and remain supporting MPs in general, along with, of course, the courts that we know love the European Union. It says ministers also want to ensure that any wording or non-clementure in laws will not lead judges who are reading it to refer back to European Court of Justice rulings, which could lead to EU case law being enforced in the UK by the back door, which obviously is very concerning and cannot happen. Any European Court of Justice ruling that comes up now cannot be used in any court case in the UK. That may be good or bad for people, but that's what Brexit is. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. Judges obviously won't like it, but who gives a fuck about them? They certainly don't give a fuck about us or the kids of this country that they allow to be abused and raped consistently. It goes on, the work has started with the EU Withdrawal Treaty, which carefully avoids the usage of EU terminology to use more international law terms, as it should do. One example was how the treaty sought to replace EU-friendly terms like state aid with subsidiary system, which is more commonly used at World Trade Organization. The Cabinet Office is understood to have been coordinating the work that has been largely carried out by the individual departments. A second minister said the number of SIs and changes are a lot. Anything of note will have to go through the Commons at some point. There is still quite a number of SIs to go through, but all the major stuff is done. Which is obviously good news if they've done all the major stuff, but it will be the little bits and shit bits that will actually allow them to drag EU law back into the UK. They need to go through it all with a fine-tooth comb and obliterate it. And here we have Marc Francois, chairman of the ERG, said in 2016 the Eurosceptic movement made a fundamental mistake when we relaxed after the referendum thinking we had won. Yes, that is something that people certainly did do, but we expected democracy to be there. Well, at least some people did. I knew it really wouldn't. Personally, I expected in 2016 them to come out and say within a few months that we would have a second referendum because the first one didn't go well. If they thought they would get away with it, then I'm sure they would. If it was this year, you can guarantee that they would say that and get away with it because we wouldn't be able to go out and protest. You can't even go and see your mother or your kids, for fuck's sake. He goes on though, in contrast, the ardent Remainers redoubled their efforts and after much parliamentary chicanery very nearly overturned the result, something I mentioned once again in a video the other day. We must never repeat our gross error and always remain vigilant against any attempt to rejoin, especially from a Labour Party led by a Remainer at heart. Yes, the King of Remain for the Labour Party last year. He pushed their Remain second referendum policies that sent them into the shitter. So maybe we should all thank him, really. Now obviously, if all this is true and it actually happens, this is good news because it will stop Labour putting us back in the EU. Of course, it's relying on a Tory government that hasn't really lived up to its word so far. So take it with all the salt in the fucking Dead Sea.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going and we are glad to be going. We're off.